Los Angeles, California, known for film and television, Hollywood, famous sights, and beautiful coastlines. But there's something else that California is known for. Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Oma, Hairy Man are just a few names that the creature is referred to as. But it wasn't until October 1958, in the Bluff Creek area of Northern California, that a road logger named Jerry Crew casted the first tracks belonging to a creature with large humanoid-looking feet. As a result, the name Bigfoot was coined. But is the legend of Sasquatch today just an isolated event, or is it all over the US? And what about places like Southern California, where it's very dry and has a desert-like environment? Is it possible that Sasquatch can live there?
I mean, it's funny because you have reports off the beaten track of what you would call Bigfoot Country, and whether we have the proper habitat here, I don't know if that's really true. Maybe it's too dry, maybe there's not enough food. But say, for instance, a person might go from one good area through a desert. Say if it were a pioneer on a horseback, that person might go from one good area where it's rich in water and food to another area that's rich in water and food. But to get there, you have to go through the desert. So that might be the reason why we see reports in areas that you normally don't expect them to have them.
I think there is viable Sasquatch habitat across the United States and into Canada as well, in North America in general. Not everywhere. There's certainly plenty of urban areas, places in the Midwest where there's not a lot of cover, not a lot of resources, not a lot of wildlife in general, farmland, deserts, that kind of stuff. But there are pockets in those areas.
Yeah, like Southern California, the Grapevine, through that zone, definitely Squatch. I mean, it's not like up here, they don't got tons of resources, but there's enough, and it might be a better place to go Squatch, especially with these droughts worsening and worsening. And they got those big lakes there, but if you got, at least 10 miles away from those big lakes, and you get out there like September when it's just bone, like this year especially, when it's bone dry, you might have a better chance going there than up here because there's less places they could be anywhere up here, there's water everywhere.
I think you have to ask yourself this. If you decided to go on the lam, or you and your family decided to live in the woods, where couldn't you survive? If you used the right tactics to avoid people, could a family group live in a state like Iowa? What about a state like Washington or Oregon? I think there's tons of food sources in the Pacific Northwest. And if you're going with a Gigantopithecus theory, it's the right location. Something hit a brick wall of a bounty of resources there in the Pacific Northwest, plenty of places to hide and plenty of food sources to be found. But I still think Bigfoot could spread out across the lower 48. And in terms of acreage and space for something like that, in some of the lower 48 that have been populated since the colonial era, you still have like 3, 4, 5 generation farms that are only utilized about 30%.
Okay, so most places can support a species such as Sasquatch. But how come there's not more footage of the creature that surfaces?
I think that there's not more photos and videos of these creatures because how often do you have your camera out? And let's just say that how often do you have your camera out and with the sole intention of trying to photograph a Bigfoot? Almost never. When do you have your camera out with the intention of capturing something in nature? Not all that much. When I'm in nature, I like to be present. I like to be focused on what's going on around me. I'm not really having my camera out. And then thirdly, I think that all these encounters that you hear about are very brief and fleeting in nature. So how are you going to have enough time to recognize what's going on, grab your phone camera or grab a camera if you have it there, unlock it, get it going, and then record the phenomenon? I don't think that that happens too often.
or as an aspiring wildlife filmmaker, I can tell you that I have just as much difficulty filming a bear as probably a Bigfoot. You know, they don't want to be around people, so when you turn that bend, you've got a couple of seconds to power up a camera, hit the record button, and stabilize your shot to have that animal within that frame. Even with your cell phone, even though the technology's improving for quick shots, we're not getting a lot of that stuff. And I think it's just because we're not prepared to have those sightings the way that we should be, and so we can't accurately document them.
If you take into account, right now there's more than ever, okay? Two, our problem is that society demands perfectly clear pictures. So then you got only so many people actually take the time to go out and look for Bigfoot. Even though if you're in the Bigfoot community, it looks like there's a lot. That small group of them that actually go out there and look, are actually actively taking pictures, that is such a small, tiny percentage of the population of just America alone.
I think the primary reason is they're just too quick. You can't get your phone out quick enough to take a picture. It's kind of like, why aren't there any good UFO videos right now? Kind of the same thing.
BFRO researcher and Bluff Creek project member Tate Hieronymus and researcher partner Austin Brown were researching an area with recent activity. It was here, the Buck Creek Trail. This very ridge that Tate and Austin went in not knowing what to expect, with doubts that anything would even be in the area. That night would catch Tate and Austin completely off guard.
We were kind of hanging out, got everything set up, having some beers, and just kicking back until it got a little later.
And we went down the trail, and Tate said, hold on, wait a minute, I'm going to make a call. I think he actually made a wood knock first. I think he did a knock on a stump first, and then after that, he said, okay, I'm going to try a call.
The sound did not carry like I wanted to. So I was like, well, I'll just do a whoop. So I did a whoop. And then we're kind of talking, and then like all of a sudden I hear a response back to what sounded just like my whoop.
And Tate said, did you hear that? And I said, you hear what? I didn't hear anything.
And I was like, dude, Austin, I heard something. There's this overlook I kind of saw, so let's go back and kind of scan the ridge right there.
And I had my headlamp on, and I just started scanning the ridge. And as I was scanning the ridge, I mean, plain as day, it was one of the first things that I saw was two big, glowing, yellowish orange eyes shining right back at us.
And that's when I started to record with the FLIR.
I was frozen. I had absolutely no idea what it was. And eventually I got to the point where I just turned to Tate and I said, Tate, what is that? And Tate couldn't respond very much either.
So I was relying on Austin's viewpoint because he was using the headlamp so he could still see the eye shine. And so I'm recording it, not being able to see it. I changed the filters on it, and I eventually aim it down to see because I had my headlamp on too. So I was like, okay, it's still there. So I bring the FLIR back up.
At one point, I asked Tate, should I make a call? Should I do a whoop? Something like that? See if I could get some response from it?
That's when Austin does those calls. Then a few seconds later, he's like, dude, it's gone.
I did one, and no response. Finally, I did another one. This one was more aggressive. I don't know why I decided to go a little more aggressive, but I just thought I'll try something different. And very, very intentionally, to what I saw, it just simply turned around and went away.
And then we actually fast walked back to the truck. And actually I had the FLIR still recording, and I noticed that when we got back to the truck and I turned it off.
We weren't expecting that at all. It caught us completely off guard. At one point, Tate was saying, do you think we should maybe pick another place to camp? And I said, I could use a change of scenery.
What exactly did Tate and Austin film that night? Was it a known animal? A person? Or was there actually a Sasquatch with them that night? Tate is still adamant that it's most likely a Sasquatch that he captured on film, and Austin is still unable to explain what he saw that night. As for me, I was with Tate and Austin this trip back to this area, and have concluded for myself that it's most likely a Sasquatch that Tate Hieronymus filmed that night. Nonetheless, this area has had reports in the past and continues to produce new sighting reports every year. And with research still being done, it's only a matter of time until more footage comes out of this area. And researchers agree where Sasquatch have been once, they've often returned. Just like Tate and Austin, many others still report hearing and even seeing Sasquatch on a daily basis. The Bigfoot capital of the world, Willow Creek, California. It's here that Tate Hieronymus joins Alex Petikoff, Eli Watson, and James Bobo Fay to investigate an odd and very recent report of strange calls and broken branches just outside of town.
So what was the first thing you heard up here?
Well, we were just getting out of the pool over there, and there was a really loud cracking sound coming from over there. And then it just cascaded all the way and culminated here with this branch falling on a car that was parked right there.
There's kids out here playing and screaming and stuff?
It was about 9 o'clock at night. Everybody was inside except for me and my niece. We were the only two that heard it.
So there's nothing that could have set it off, you don't think?
There was, the usual activity around here in the woods, animal, bird, whatnot.
So look how big this thing is. I mean, it's like as big as a tree.
Yeah, and this is just the end. 9 o'clock Saturday night it came down.
We gotta go check this out. Oh, that was 2 days ago. Oh wow. This is today.
That's weird.
So I don't I think this is natural. This is all natural.
Right.
Doesn't mean the whistling and all the other stuff was.
Regardless of the happenings on the property, one thing's for sure, is that this area is undoubtedly Bigfoot country. As the night goes on, things get weirder and Tate, Alex, and Eli approach the famous louse camp.
Tate was in his truck, Eli was in a Corolla, Eli and I, and we had to stop to move rocks. I mean, there's some pretty big rocks in the road, so we just start getting out and start picking them up, chucking them off into the side of the hill. They're landing down in the creek. You can hear them hitting the water, splashing.
The only thing illuminating the road are the headlights, and Alex swears he heard something, some sort of grunt up on the ridge above us.
I thought I heard something up on the ridge, like first a movement and then like a rah kind of noise. It was tough to tell because there were rocks tumbling down the hill.
We don't really put much stock in it. We're moving rocks, it's loud, our cars are running, you know, and then I pick up a rock, I throw it over the edge, and then I hear Alex say, "Hey, move out of the way," and the rocks start coming down.
I hear pebbles start coming off of the top of the hill, and then you start hearing bigger rocks, and then I see rocks about this big coming right at me.
You know, so Tate and I take cover behind Tate's car, and Alex takes cover on the other side.
And we're all focused on the hill. Tate says he thought he saw eye shine. He's going to get his fleur. We hear something down towards the creek start walking away.
That's the part that really throws me off, because if that didn't happen, I would have just said, you know, a mountain lion or a bear, curious as to what the noise is, came up to the edge, got a little too close, the dirt slid off, you know, there was a little bit of an overhang, you know, if you're heavy. Even I was able to, like, if I stepped just right, part of the cliff would fall off and go straight down to where we were at.
I don't want to say it was like coordinated, but it felt kind of odd that it was almost like whatever happened from the hill was a little bit of a distraction. Maybe something was down there, and we were throwing rocks, like terrorizing that area, you know?
All these rocks are presenting a difficulty, a challenge. What's up?
Oh my god.
Did you hear that?
Hear what?
It's like rolling down the hill, though.
There's a creek down there.
Thought I heard like a rah.
I didn't hear nothing. I want to throw one.
Yeah, that's a creek.
Oh,
That rock slide incident wouldn't be the last bit of strange activity to occur during this expedition to Bluff Creek. As the week progressed, I met up with Tate, Alex, and Eli at the China Flats Museum in Willow Creek. There, we got to see Bigfoot history. The museum was even generous enough to let us look at the original tracks from all around the historical Bluff Creek region. A true honor.
This is an original track from Patty on the phone site.
That's a first gen?
Yeah.
As night fell, heading back to camp after hearing about the rock slide that had happened, everyone and myself were eager to get some kind of action again. We made a plan and we all headed out to an area known for Sasquatch activity. It is also one of the sacred places in the area, referred to by us as No-Go Valley. As the night unfolded, there wasn't much sound at all, let alone Bigfoot. But we did see some strange lights that appeared in the sky and had a weird way about them. While one was possibly an iridium flare, the other had some characteristics to it that were unexplainable. A later comment by someone else when hearing the story was, "You guys saw one of those orbs." Regardless of the strange lights we saw, this place is undoubtedly peaceful and majestic. The next day, fellow researcher Ron Reed and his dog Bandit joined us for the remaining leg of the trip, just in time to hike down to camp at the Patterson-Gimlin film site. As night encroached, we hear some strange sounds, but unfortunately, nothing we can say for sure was Sasquatch related. Although the night didn't yield much in the way of Bigfoot activity, we did join a short list of people who have camped at the Patterson-Gimlin film site, and that will always be a memory not to be forgotten. Still itching for some kind of activity to happen, we plan to go and investigate an area called Layered Meadow. We decided to split up into 2 teams in order to increase our chances of getting activity. We sat and let an hour of silence go by. No calls, no knocks, no movement, just silence. Then, after the first call, Alex and Tate were greeted with something being thrown at them, followed by a distant knock coming from the same direction. Throughout the night, we continued to do knocks, and we heard a few responses. And when they stopped, we decided to call it a night. Unfortunately, the next day, Alex, Eli, and myself had to leave. But for the final night, Tate and Ron camped with Damon, Terry, and Stevie over at a spot called the Cell Site. With past efforts in playing music and getting responses in the same general area, Tate decided to play his bass guitar and sure enough, was greeted with a response. Even though Bluff Creek was full of ambiguous, strange sounds and sights, the takeaway from it is how vast and beautiful this region is, and how extremely possible it is that Sasquatches could be living and roaming the Bluff Creek region today. Although there are a great number of Bigfoot reports that are credible, misidentification of Bigfoots are most likely. A short glimpse of a bear, a deer, or even a stump. But what about when people say that they couldn't move or that something was holding them down? Was it Bigfoot? Or was it something else? Something perhaps not as elusive as Bigfoot, but something that can be just as scary.
I think a lot of those reports were I woke up to something, or I was just falling asleep when I heard something. I think a lot of that could be sleep paralysis, because I had it happen to me before I even knew what it was. And I swore for years I had a demon sit on my chest, and I was awake because I was totally conscious. But then I found out, I read some articles, and these scientists sent me, that I met through Bigfooting, sent me these reports and scholarly journals on sleep paralysis. And when I read it, I'm like, oh man, that's exactly what I had.
I don't think there's necessarily a connection between the Sasquatches and any other sort of psychological phenomenon, whether it's sleep paralysis or hallucinations or anything like that. I personally don't think so. Lots of people do. But again, I'm an evidence-driven researcher, not a speculative one in such a way. Like, I don't chase those down as hard as I do the evidence.
Sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is the state during waking up or falling asleep. During an episode of sleep paralysis, a person may hallucinate. They may hear, feel, and even see things that aren't there. Sleep paralysis can be triggered by sleep deprivation, psychological stress, and abnormal sleep cycles, which is something that Sasquatch researchers often subject themselves to. So the question is, could some of the misidentification reports of Sasquatch be as simple as a common occurrence of sleep paralysis?
One thing that I've noticed, kind of studying this phenomenon, is that a lot of people will have weird experiences in the woods and immediately assume it was Bigfoot related. If you have a weird experience in the woods, why should you assume it's Bigfoot related? I think that a lot of reports of these weird things, they may happen to these people, but I haven't experienced anything like that, so I can't, I don't know if it's Bigfoot related. I tend to think it's not.
I do tend to believe that lack of sleep and, other contributing factors can lead to a lot of misidentification, as, one could take away from experiences in wartime or anything like that. But I definitely think that cannot explain away a lot of the incidences that happen out in the field.
Here's an example. A sleep-deprived Bigfoot researcher dozing in and out of sleep. All of a sudden, one of the times they wake up, they're not able to move, and only able to see. They see and hear a shadowy figure outside their tent walking around and begins to mess with their tent. And as quickly as it all began, it's gone.
People who experience things like sleep paralysis report seeing dark shadows and feeling like they can't move. And, there are a lot of those sort of things that bleed over into Bigfoot sightings. I've heard reports of people waking up in the middle of the night in their tents and seeing a big shadow outside of their tent, and they can't move and they're terrified, and this thing kind of moves around, and that does fall within the idea of sleep paralysis enough that I'd be willing to consider that an option.
Could it have been Sasquatch? The possibility is there, but the possibility is also there for it to have been sleep paralysis. For Tate Hieronymus, sleep paralysis is a recurring event, and it's something that makes him wonder if it's all part of the equation in misidentifying Sasquatch. When it comes to places to look for an elusive creature such as Sasquatch, Iowa would probably be very low on the list. It would surprise most that there is a plentiful amount of forest in Iowa. But could there really be Sasquatch in Iowa? On November 16, 1979, Minburn, Iowa, a BFRO report of a Bigfoot came in from an eyewitness named Larry Wilson. Wilson described the creature as hunched over and dark. He also described hearing heavy, rhythmic breathing and having kind of a raspy sound.
It was about 9:45 to 10 o'clock in that period sometime. And I heard the dogs barking, which is not an unusual occurrence.
Where was your family?
At my house. They were at a church meeting Thursday night, which they go to every Thursday night. I heard the dogs barking, went out to shut them up and look around. I'm always aware of, prowlers being out or somebody with the dogs bark. Every, 2 or 3 times a week they'll be barking, and I always investigate what's barking at. The one dog was faced back toward the woods, toward the river. I told her to shut up. At the point that I told her to shut up, she did. I heard a definite sound which was like a muffled breathing at that point from a long distance away. And I knew it was, a good 75 yards or so away from where I could hear the sound. But it scared me. I closed my patio doors, ran upstairs to the living room window, cranked the living room window open, and at that point I could hear it, a definite breathing that sounded like the exhaling of a snorting horse, except it was in a rhythmic pattern. It was every second and a half. And within that same time frame of approximately 15 or 20 seconds, when I definitely heard the loud breathing, it walked out from behind the bushes directly underneath my security light. I watched it for 4 or 5 steps that it took, which was probably 4 or 5 seconds. It had a definite swinging of the arms, not a high swinging, but more so than a human walking. I would say that it was shaggy or hairy, but I could not swear to the hair because I couldn't see that fine of details from 130 feet away or so, with just the lighting of a security light. It never made any directional movement toward the house or toward me, no head movement at all. It continued to proceed in a southeasterly direction across my driveway. At that point, I ran to the telephone and called the Dallas County Sheriff. The Dallas County Sheriff arrived, or Sheriff's deputy arrived about 5 minutes after I called, and we went out in the yard and tried to find tracks to confirm that something had been there. The deputy found the tracks and backtracked it back into the alfalfa field, which is approximately 50, 60 feet from where we found the first tracks. We could find no more tracks in the alfalfa field, and the tracks that was in this one strip of my yard, we could find none after that, after it crossed my limestone gravel driveway.
Being from Iowa, Tate Hieronymus went to investigate an area south of Des Moines known as Three Lakes Forest. Unfortunately, nothing happened that night, but Tate knows the area is squatchy. So Tate decided to reach out to local Iowa BFRO researcher and member of the Lowlands Bigfoot Research Group, Steve Moon. Upon request, Tate asked if he can use some recordings of strange howls taken by Steve Moon and Brian Woods in the Three Lakes Forest area. This is what they recorded.
I think if you had really good footage, like a lot of it, like if you had a really, like someone threw like $50 million at it, some rich, Saudi prince or something goes, here's $50 million, I want good footage. You put professional wildlife photographers that film snow leopards and stuff out there, like real wildlife guys that have 20 years experience and all the top gear. I think with that and good DNA, it'd be enough to get them protected. But until they get one to study on a slab, it's still going to be up in the air to some degree. But I think with the repeatable, many examples of DNA and good footage, I think that's enough to get them protected.
In order for Sasquatch to be proven as a real species, unfortunately, I think a body is probably going to be the most convincing. That's something that scientists are going to look at and determine that it's a biological specimen.
I think it's going to take a body. Science, the mainstream science narrative will not be satisfied until there is an actual Sasquatch corpse found, or killed, or taken in and studied and examined.
I don't necessarily feel like it has to be a body. I feel like it has to be an attitude change. I feel like the same people, the skeptics that put so much pressure on Bigfooters and the investigators that are going out here and pursuing things in cryptozoology, I feel like their attitude has to change, and somewhere down the line they have to say, no, that is sufficient. That That's a significant find you found, so let's contribute to your effort and find this thing together. I don't think it's necessary that you have to kill one.
I think at the end of the day, we are needing to see an actual body in the hands of science in order to get more evidence from that.
It's gonna take a body either being found, one of them being killed or captured, and shown to the people physically.
For a complete scientific acceptance of it, yeah, it's going to take a body. I think pictures are just going to keep adding to the mystery of it. Video is going to keep adding to the mystery of it.
As sad as it is to say, I think it's going to have to be a body. I think it's going to have to be someone's going to have to put one down. As sad as it is. But if you're like me, you believe that it's not a sole individual, that it is a species. There might, we don't know how many of them are out there, but I think it's going to take a body, and we're going to have to identify it through science and be, this is not a known species or this, that, and the other, whatever that process will be. But I think anything short of that, you're just always going to have naysayers. I mean, it's a perfect example. Look at COVID, for example. You could give everyone all the data in the world and people can still deny it. But, now we're talking about a cryptid that, I mean, people are really not going to believe it until you really show them some hard evidence.
At the end of the day, proof is only going to come in the form of a dead animal or a large part of the dead animal. I don't advocate it personally. I'm not really here because I'm not going to pull the trigger. So I don't think it's appropriate for me to say it should be done. But I also am not naive. That is what it's going to take.
No matter how much evidence we collect and gather, it's all useless, basically, until we have a body. Mainstream science needs a body. You need something you can put on a table and cut apart and dissect and analyze. Like those were the rules set up by science hundreds of years ago, and those are the rules that we have to follow. So until there is a body presented to mainstream scientists and the academics of the world, this isn't going to be taken seriously.
Until that day comes, Bigfoot researchers will continue to be in the field, looking for evidence to help prove their existence, to uncover the truth of Sasquatch.